If you enjoy truthful and heartfelt conversations to inspire you to become a better version of yourself, empowering stories will help you.
Hello, Paul. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Very well. I'm delighted to have you here. Thank you very much. I met Paul through our investment clubs because he's a club member of one of our groups. And we met face to face at an event that we held in Cork in the south of Ireland. He was sharing so many interesting things that I thought, oh my God, you've got to come to the program. So he did. Paul, would you like me to introduce you or would you prefer to do it yourself? And he said, I can do it. Not only that, I can be talking for 24 hours in a row.
Yeah. I can bore people to death. But I'm a hypnotherapist, as you know. I'm also a life and business coach. And I've been doing that for about 20 years. Would you like to know how I got into this business?
Please do. Whatever you think that could help other people become inspired, because if you did it, they can do it as well.
Yeah, well, as a kid, I was always known as the dreamy one, the black sheep of the family, the guy with, living in not so much a fantasy world, but just, didn't fit in. Not that I didn't want to fit in, but I just didn't kind of fit in. I had friends and all the rest, but from a very early age, like, when people were saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? I couldn't really decide on anything. No conventional jobs or business really attracted me. And I remember as a very young child saying, I want to be a fireman when I grow up because I liked the idea of spraying things with water and driving around a big fire truck. But beyond that, I hadn't given a whole lot of thought to it. And even in career guidance in school, I kind of thought, okay, well, I'm interested in art and probably a little bit in psychology, but it's hard to blend those two things together. So I kind of drifted into working for the post office. And I found out on day 2 in that job that I didn't like it. I hated it.
That was clever.
Yes, but it was the early 1980s, and in Ireland then there was a massive recession. Everybody was kind of leaving the country. You either, if you didn't have a job, you left the country. I remember meeting a classmate of mine, and he was talking about having a class reunion, a school reunion. And I said to him, Mike, it's only myself and you. Well, we can go to the pub now. That would be the reunion. Everybody else is gone. So around that time, I was going out with a girl, and I got her pregnant, and I decided to get married. And then I thought, okay, I have a son in the world. And I thought, okay, I'm lucky to have a job. So I kind of put my head down and just worked. And the year after, I had a baby daughter come into my world as well. And I thought, okay, I just need to keep working, head down, do what I need to provide a roof for my family. But I was very unhappy. I felt very unfulfilled. And this is no reflection on my now ex-partner, but it was just me, this deep unsatisfaction. And I remember going around in my post van delivering letters, listening to Ian Dempsey on the radio. And he had a lady on talking about dream interpretation and numerology. And I was fascinated listening to her. And I thought, God, I wonder how you could ever get into that. But I kind of didn't give it that much more thought. But I remember my life kind of came to a crisis. And I think we kind of, sometimes we're always projecting energy out to the universe. And that energy, it meets up with energy that's compatible, and we do attract things into our lives, but sometimes we don't do it in the right way. So when I explain my story, you'll understand what I mean. There was one weekend I was at a particularly low ebb. My aunt had died that I was very fond of. I was living in a rural area. I used to walk the dog at night. I had a lovely golden retriever who was my therapist because I'd go out at night talking to the dog. Now, luckily, the dog never talked back to me, but I was almost as if I was able to confide in the dog. So I remember one Sunday evening when my aunt had died, out walking dogs. It was about 11 o'clock at night, so it was pitch black. I didn't mind walking in the darkness, kind of gave me time to think. But I was so anxious and so wound up and so frustrated that at one point I just stopped. I was in the middle of nowhere and I just threw my arms up into the air and I roared at the top of my voice, Jesus Christ, if there's an effing God out there, make something happen to change my life. And the very next morning, my life changed dramatically. Years later, I went to it was a holistic fair, and I was talking to an astrologer, and she was able to see at certain times in my life, she said, you called in tremendous power and flames and energy and fire into your your aura or whatever it is, because she said I was born with no fire, but she said you call it in for some reason. And she was able to pinpoint that exact night in my horoscope. So what happened that night? And go, oh, that was the night before the accident. The very next morning, on the way to work, I was involved in a serious car accident. I was driving up a hill. There was a guy coming towards me in a JCB at the top of the hill, and somebody impatiently behind him driving a big white van couldn't wait to get over the top of the hill. So he decided to pass out on top of the hill. And he ran me off the road, literally. I swerved to avoid him. I went into a hedge, ran across the road, hit 2 cars into another hedge. And I'm sitting there in front of my vehicle, is all kind of crushed up. And I realized I'm injured. My back is sore. I have a funny feeling in my neck and my arm. And then smoke starts to fill the cabin of the van that I was driving. And I go, oh shit, I'm going to be burned alive. Then I was aware I couldn't get the door open, so I panicked even more. And then one of the drivers that I'd hit, he luckily enough was able to wedge down the window, and he dragged me out through the window. I ended up in hospital, strapped to a gurney so tightly that I couldn't move. But I wasn't sure, was it that I couldn't move because I was strapped so tightly, or was I paralyzed? Because I knew there was a problem with my neck. And everybody that was coming in, I was saying to him, am I paralyzed? And he goes, no, I don't think so. And I said, well, I moved my foot, and tell me, can you see it moving? And then kind of go, okay, have you done it yet? And I go, oh shit. And I could overhear the doctors talking, nurses saying, oh my, that guy, he could have easily been killed. And I kind of go, yeah, and this would have been the end of my life. I would have died unfulfilled, unhappy. So I still didn't have the answer to my problem then, how to be fulfilled. But as a result of that accident, I was off work for months and months and months. And I met this wonderful physiotherapist. I'd known her previously because I would have studied martial arts. I used to train and teach martial arts. And after tournaments or rigorous training sessions, she'd put me back together again. And so she was trying to get my neck and my back working again. And I had a collar on and all of that kind of stuff. It was an awful lot of pain. And in our discussion, she said, you would have met a great physiotherapist. You know so much about the body and how it works. Because I was always into health and fitness, and I was considering training as a fitness instructor at one point as well. And she said, why don't you go home and look up something on the internet? Maybe there's a physiotherapy thing you could do. And I thought, okay. So we'd only got the I don't know, what was it, Windows 95 back then. It was one of the first Windows things. So I went home. It was the old dial-up connection. You know, where you dial it up and goes, then it might cut out even before you get properly connected.
Just what age were you, so that we have a reference?
I was in my mid-30s.
All right, so very young, very
young.
young.
I'm in my late 50s now. So I was looking up physiotherapy courses, and I couldn't find anything that took less than 7 years to do to qualify, and took a load of money that I didn't have. So I ended up even more frustrated. And again, I threw my hands up in the air and said, oh God, what else can I do? And my fingers literally went down and they tapped on the keyboard, hypnotherapy. And
they
there was
by themselves?
Yes. And that's the thing. There was 2 things wrong with that. First of all, I didn't know there was a profession called hypnotherapy. I had no idea. And the second thing is I couldn't spell it because I'm dyslexic. So I found an institute in Cork that I could study the theory of hypnosis through a correspondence course. You get the materials in the post. And then if I was interested, I could go on to practical classes to study it in Dublin. And it was £700, punts, old money at the time. And I thought, oh my God, this is so fascinating. I love this, but I don't have the money. And again, I was frustrated. So as time went on, I gradually became better and better, and I was able to move about and drive about a bit. And I remember being down in a bookshop in Cork. I love bookshops, old bookshops. I just get lost in them. And I was looking in the self-help section. And this is a thing that if you watch people in bookshops, you can tell a lot about them by where they go first. You know? So I was going to the self-help section because I was looking for a book that would fix me. And I was looking for a simple book to tell me do A, B, and C, and you're sorted. And I never found such a book. But
surprise.
Then I was frustrated, Anna. I was frustrated. I'm thinking, oh God. And next thing, my left hand goes up all by itself, and it reaches up onto the top bookshelf, and it takes out this big dirty green book, big heavy green book. And I took it down. And I go, okay, that's a bit weird. And first thing I noticed about the book was its size. It was about 500-600 pages. I'm not going to read that. I'm impatient. I couldn't be bothered reading that. And it was a book called Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. And I had no idea who Tony Robbins was at the time. But I thought, I'm not going to buy that book. I think it was £14 at the time. It was quite a lot of money. And I couldn't let go of the book. My hand would not release the book. And he ended up holding the book up at my chest and taking other books down and trying to look at them. And and I thought, the only way I'm going to manage this is either I buy this book or I steal it. So I ended up buying it. And I was so annoyed with myself when I came out of the bookshop. I threw the book on the floor of the car. I drove 3.5 hours back home cursing the book. When I got home, I flung it on the floor of my bed. It wasn't worthy to go on the bedside locker. And that book sat there for about 3 weeks, about 21 days. And I cursed that book every night I went to bed. I got that bloody book. I'm wasting so much money on it. And in the morning, I cursed it again. And after doing that for weeks, I can go, I need to get out of this cycle. And do you know what? I need to get rid of that book. So I don't destroy books. I give books away. I wouldn't bin a book or whatever. And I thought, do you know what? If I've given that book away to somebody, they'll probably ask me, what's it about? So I thought I'm going to open it and read a bit so I can tell them that I know what it's about and it's crap and all the rest. So I sat on the bed and I opened the book, and 7 hours later, I'm still there. The book just opened my mind to a completely different way of seeing things. And in the book, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what Tony said, he was talking about if you don't know where you want to go in your life, but you know you want to go somewhere. He said, write down 3 things that you're currently good at. So I thought, okay, what am I good at? And I was often told I had a good speaking voice. In the post office, I used to be a trade union representative, and I'd get up at conferences and speak and all the rest. So I thought, okay, write down I have a good voice. And then I thought, I like to help people. So I wrote that down as number 2. And then I can go, what will I write down for number 3? And I thought I'd no educational qualifications beyond my leaving cert, and I had to have 2 goes at that, and that's another story. And I thought, again, frustration. What else can I do? And this random thought dropped into my head of when I was 7 years of age, I learned how to click my fingers. This memory just floated into my head. It was Christmas Eve. And my mother had been telling us how, when she was a child, they used to go to midnight mass. And when she'd come home, her father would have the Christmas tree up and all the presents would be there and there'd be big excitement. So they were reintroducing midnight mass into our parish. Then I hadn't had it for years and years and years, my first experience. And I was allowed to stay up. So I was washed, dressed, and my mother put me sitting in front of the telly with my brothers and sister. And there was a show on telly, and I think it was called the Black and White Minstrel Show. So you had these, it's kind of very politically incorrect now, but you had these white guys dressed as black guys with straw hats and canes, and they were dancing over and back across the screen, singing and clicking their fingers. And as a young kid, I was kind of looking at the screen, looking at kind of how are they doing that? And kind of, I can make that noise, and how are they doing it? And I studied it until I was able to do it. And then, like an irritating 7-year-old, I wouldn't stop doing it. I kept doing it. And when my mother was bringing me into mass later on that night, she was bringing me up the church. I was still doing this. And then she kind of goes, stop that. You're embarrassing us. So I wrote that down as my 3rd qualification, the ability to click my fingers, having a laugh at myself, mocking myself. So fast forward about 9-10 months, I'd sent off for the prospectus for this course from Cork, and I'd received it, and I'd done nothing with it. I left it in the drawer. So I'm out mowing the lawn, and the mower breaks down. And it was a ride-on mower, and I get off the mower, and I start walking towards the house, into the house, and I'm thinking, why am I walking into the house? I should be going around to the shed at the back to find some tools to fix this. And like a zombie in a trance, I just walk into the house, walk down to the room, and open the drawer where that prospectus was, and I took it out. And I looked at it, and it says closing date for applications was the June bank holiday weekend. And I'm thinking, that's the day after tomorrow. And then I looked at the account, my bank account. In the meanwhile, I got some compensation money out of the accident, because it wasn't my fault, of course. And I'd spent the compensation money on doing up my house. I brought my ex-wife to Paris. I brought my daughter to Liverpool to see Liverpool playing. She was a fan of Michael Owen. She had a crush on him at the time. And I bought my son a little kind of a model radio-controlled airplane. He was into that. He joined a club to do that. And my wife came in, and she was kind of looking over my shoulder. And I said, I'm kind of just looking at this, and looked at the account. It was exactly £700 to the penny in the account. And I'm kind of going, I don't want to blow the last of my money on this course. And she said, look, in fairness, you spent it all on everybody else. Go for it. So I did. I took a chance and I blew all my money on this course. And when the course materials came the following week in the post, there was 14 books on the recommended reading list. I read them all the first week. I couldn't get enough of it. I was like Neo in the Matrix, just absorbing this information. And when I went to do the practical classes in Dublin, the Marino Institute of Education, it was no learning to me at all. I was just duck to water. And all these years later, I find myself doing a profession where I get to use my voice, I get to help people, and I get to click my fingers.
I'm speechless, Paul. I'm generally speechless because there's so much to soak in and to bring in. Probably what attracts me more is the fact that your hand went by itself to grab the book, that you follow your instinct, even if you're trying to fight it, that you asked to a higher power for something and the higher power provided. Now I have tweaked that, and I'm sure you give more of a small print to it.
I tell that story to people sometimes, that when I'm coaching people and they don't know what their goal is, but they do know that they want something. And so you don't have to know exactly. It's handy if you do, but you don't have to know exactly, but you have to create energy to begin, the momentum to begin to push yourself in the direction of your goal. And you can make a goal. I made an entire career out of 3 spurious pieces of information, of data. Use my voice, help people, click my fingers. I mean, if I went into career guidance class with that data, I'd be thrown out again.
Wow, it's so amazing. It's so amazing. Now, tell us, when you ask this higher power for something now, how did you do it?
I would.
You don't get into a car crash or the sky.
No, it's strange, and I've been through lots of different belief systems in my life. I was going to say I was born a Catholic, but Richard Dawkins would dispute that. We were born into a particular religion, and I kind of would have rebelled against that in my teenage years and all the rest. And then in my early 20s, I was part of what mainstream religions would call a cult. And in fact, I ended up running that cult for a while as well. And then when I left that, I got really interested in studying different religions worldwide, and realized that, no one religion has a monopoly on truth. And religion can be like a software, can be like a program that you can use to run your life. But there's a spirituality, I suppose, that's separate from religion. And sometimes people don't get that. You don't have to have any kind of religious affiliation to be spiritual. And we all have this spirit, this energy within us. And when you learn to connect to that in whatever shape or form, I mean, one of my first experiences of that, I can say, Anna, was that when I was 16, I ran a Dublin City Marathon. The Dublin City Marathon had only kicked off, I think, the year before, and I loved running. I wasn't the fastest at running, but I knew I could run forever. And I was running one evening with my eldest brother, Seamus, and a good friend of mine, also called Seamus. And one of them suggested, why don't we run this marathon in Dublin in October? And I'm kind of going, you mean like a marathon? Like, and they said, yeah, 26 miles. I said, but I've only the furthest I've ever run at a push was 10 miles. I said, how are we going to manage 26? And they said, well, it'll be fine. We'll run a bit. We'll walk a bit. We'll talk a bit. We'll just get you up. We'll have a bit of fun, So a few months later, I found myself in the start line of this Dublin City Marathon. I'm only 16. I had to get my parents' permission. I think I was one of the youngest in the country. I often thought I must look that up. So I started off, and it was good fun. I think it was 8,000 people in the race that year. And we all surged forward. I got a bad start because everything was so compacted in that there was a lamppost somewhere along the street, and I was heading for the lamppost and I couldn't miss it, and it kind of just hit my chest, and I kind of just glanced sideways and I got past that. I thought that would have been a bad start to get knocked out in the first 100 meters. But everything was going swimmingly well. It was going fine. We're having a laugh and joke with people, and the banter, the crowds were great, until one of our group pointed at a sign up on the top of a telegraph pole, and the sign said 18 miles. And I go, oh, I've just run 18 miles and I haven't even noticed. I should be tired. And no sooner did I think that, then I started to feel tired. I inadvertently suggested to my body that I should be tired, and my body complied. And the group that I was with fragmented. Some of them dropped out because it had the same effect on everybody. We hadn't noticed up until that. And some of them dropped out. Some of them got into Red Cross ambulances, went back. And I found myself a bit isolated. And I saw, when they talk about hitting this wall in marathon running, it's physical exhaustion, but it's mental exhaustion. And I saw grown men sitting down on the road crying, sobbing their heads, hands and heads, sobbing. And it was like a war zone. And I remember I felt I was dying. I had no idea if anybody asked me who I was or what I was doing, that I wouldn't be able to tell them. And to rub salt into the wound, I was passed out by this guy that I later found out was 74 years of age. And he just went running past me, and I kind of go, oh God, if the lads at home find out that I was beaten by a 74-year-old man, I'll never be able to live this thing. So I had made up my mind that the next water station, I knew there had to be a water station somewhere along that there would be a Red Cross ambulance there, and I was going to crawl into that and go home. And on the way up to that Red Cross station, there was crowd radio 2FM had an outdoor broadcast, and they were blaring out music, and it was a Neil Diamond song, What a Beautiful Noise. And I wasn't particularly a Neil Diamond fan, but the tempo of the music was uplifting, and the crowd were getting going. And there was a guy in the middle of the road. He was in a black suit and a white shirt, and he was pissed drunk. And he was egging everybody on, and the crowd were laughing at him, and he was entertaining and everything. And suddenly I felt myself just with this energy, from slouched down, ready to drop dead, shoulders back, chest out. And I powered through that water station, up the road. I'm running maybe half a mile later, and I kind of go, I forgot to stop. I forgot to take a drink. And like, if I had taken a drink, I would have been 100% sure that somebody had spiked that drink. And I thought, what is this? I've taken nothing into my body, but my body is suddenly energized. What has changed? And I thought, in here, this has changed. And I thought, my God, if I could bottle this and sell it, I'd be a millionaire. And I said to people, that was my first introduction to hypnosis. Power of the mind, how your mind can shape you physically and mentally. Wow. So when I'm helping people, I can go, how do you feel physically? And where's that feeling coming from? I believe that every ailment, every physical ailment we have has a psychosomatic component. And to illustrate that, if you remember back to when you were a child and maybe at Halloween in a darkened room, and there's a load of kids there, and somebody has a candle or a flashlight under their face and looking really sinister, and they're telling a ghost story. As you listen to that ghost story, you get goosebumps up your arms, the hair stands up in the back of your neck. The room hasn't suddenly got colder. It's your body having a physical response to a psychological stimulus. And that happens 24/7, whether we know it or not. It happens 24/7. And this is, it kind of, what do you call people, who go to religious shrines like Lourdes or Knock or other places to get healing, and to get healing? It's the power of belief. Whoever you credit that to, but it's the power of belief that changes you, makes you feel different. And another example of that is that good number of years ago, I was into weightlifting, bodybuilding and stuff, and I remember I was trying to do a bench press, and I was bad at the bench press. I had a tear in my rotator cuff muscle, but I set myself a goal of getting to lift 100 kg by the end of the year. And I got close to it several times, and then my shoulder would come at me, and I'd go down in weight and up in weight. And I remember coming up to the end of the year, I hadn't achieved my goal. And I was really annoyed. And I thought, okay, I need to achieve this goal. So I rang up the guy that I trained with, and it was New Year's Eve. And to my surprise, he answered the phone. And he said, are you coming over? I said, yeah. I said, I want to come over and do a bit of weight training. He said, but it's New Year's Eve. And I said, yeah, but I haven't achieved my goal yet. And he goes, yeah, that. And he said, look, come on over. So I went over, and he said, we'll do a couple of warm-up sets first. And I was lifting okay. And then I said, okay, I think I'm ready to go for it. I'm all ready to go for it. So he put 100 kg on the bar. I couldn't lift it. It nearly crushed my chest. And I, again, frustrated, I sat up and I go, no. And I said, I'm going to have another go at this. And I had another go, and I didn't. And then I had another go, and I didn't. And I was really annoyed. And I'm just kind of lying there on the bench, my hands on my face, going, oh, damn, I can't believe I haven't achieved it. And he said to me, look, you're here. Hasn't happened for you. But look, since you're here, let's do a couple of sets of lighter weights, and then we'll go into the house, have a cup of tea, and just chalk it down to experience. So I'm giving out to myself, and he's changing the weights on the bar. And I'm lying there, hands over my face, and he goes, right, okay, come on. He said, look, give me 3 of this. So I go and I lift the bar, and it's coming down, and I go, oh, feck's sake, I can't even do this. And I'm kind of really put a lot of effort to like get it up, and then the second one, and then the third one, I look at that, I said, this has been a crap training session, haven't achieved anything. And he's laughing, and I kind of look at him, kind of really angry at him. I go, what are you laughing at? And he says, look at the bar. He'd 102 kg on the bar. I thought he'd taken off weight. He put it on. Isn't it amazing? My body hadn't gotten any stronger on it. It was my mind.
It was your mind.
Yeah. My mind believed and expected that I should lift this, and it did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Paul, ask yourself a question and keep talking. Because we're so good at talking that there's no point in me trying to interview you. So please do interview yourself. I just listen.
Okay. I like to drink tea, but I find, Anna, that when I need stuff in my life, I attract it in. And my son, my kids, they're grown-up kids now, they're in their late 30s. I've kind of tried to get them into this as well, but they've had practical experience. Like my son, when he was a kid, again, when the internet was only out, he was fascinated by planes, and he thought he'd love to be a pilot. So he actually was able to, he taught himself how to fly a plane online. He downloaded a program, and he taught himself how to fly this plane. And he would be up in his room, and he'd be on the thing and show me, like, I'm flying into New York now, Dad, and whatever. This is lovely, this is fine. And he printed out a certificate on the wall. It was like a virtual pilot's license, but didn't have enough money to train him to be a pilot. I think it was 44 grand for the initial set of lessons. So it was way beyond my capabilities then. But he got a poster, and he had it above his bed, and was a bright yellow, almost like the yellow of my cup. And he had this bright yellow plane poster over his bed. And I remember putting him to bed, and he'd be telling me about the plane, and he said, oh, that's a very rare plane. It's called a Piper Cub. And I said, are there many of them around? He said, no, I don't think so. He said that they were used after the war in the States to deliver post. And he said, but I loved the colour, everything about the plane. And that was fine. And we lived near an airstrip then. It was kind of a field airstrip. And one Sunday morning, Aaron asked me, he said, would you bring me over to the airport? I want to have a look at some planes. And there was, you could go over there and there'd be no activity. There'd be nobody around, just planes parked up. So we were looking at all of these planes, and Aaron knew all the specs about the plane. He said, that's a Cessna 7437. It can fly 200 miles on a fill of fuel. It goes at this height, and knew everything about the planes. And I'm kind of smiling at all the things he knew. And suddenly a guy comes up behind us, and he says, are you going up, lads? And I can go, no. I said, we're just looking around. He likes the planes. And he said, well, I'm going up in a few minutes. Do you want to come up? I go, yeah, okay. So a few minutes later, I find myself in the back of this Cessna plane, and Aaron's in the front, and he's flying the plane with this guy. And the guy is delighted to, like, it's dual control, so it's safe, but he's delighted that Aaron knows so much about it. And Aaron's asked him questions and everything. I'm thinking, this is great. This is absolutely fantastic. Wonderful experience and wonderful memory he's going to have of this. And we flew around the place. And then after about 20 minutes, the plane kind of banks to one side, and we're coming into land. We all kind of sway one side. And I just look out the window, and there's a hangar on the floor, and the door of the hangar opens, and this bright yellow plane is wheeled out into the morning sunlight. And I'm kind of going, oh, okay. And I know that Aaron has seen it too. And when we land, Aaron runs over, and it is that Piper Cub, that exact yellow plane. And there's an American pilot there, a young man in a jumpsuit. He'd flown in for an air show that was going to be in Dublin the next day, and he'd landed at Abershule because it was a less busy airport, and he was doing some maintenance and tests on this plane. And Aaron's all over him about the plane or whatever. And the guy says, do you want to come up and fly? So he's just landed one plane, and next thing he's up, he's flying another one. And we got photographs of Aaron. It was a two-seater plane, and Aaron sitting in the front, and the pilot was sitting behind him. And they flew all around lakes near Mullingar, and the plane can flies quite low. It was only 100 feet. And he said they were able to open the windows would kind of open up like that, and they were able to shout out and talk to fishermen down in boats below, hello, and all this kind of stuff. And he had great fun, come in, landed that plane, said goodbye to your man, and sits in the car and we're driving home and Aaron's really quiet. And next thing he goes, Dad, am I dreaming? I go, no, I don't think so. And he goes, how did that happen? And I said, could have something to do with the fact that you're obsessed with this plane, that you see it morning, noon, and night. It's there, that you wanted it. You've attracted this into your life. And the story continues because, again, we were kind of going, where can we get money to get him lessons to fly? And again, it was a Sunday morning. I'm lying in bed. You know that way you'd be half awake, half asleep. You know it's Sunday. You don't have to get up. You're thinking, I'll lie on for another half an hour. And I'm kind of in a dreamy state. And I have this dream where Aaron runs up the stairs. He runs into the room, kind of in a panic, kind of going, Dad, there's something wrong. Next thing, Aaron runs up the stairs, runs into the room, Dad. And I go, what? And he goes, there's a plane after crash landing in the field next door. And where we lived, there was a massive big field just across the road from us, a rural area. So I get dressed quickly, run down the field, and sure enough, there's a plane has crash landed. It's a small Cessna plane. And when I say crash landed, it's just landed. The propeller on the plane, there was 3 prongs on the propeller, and they had changed that prop that morning, but they hadn't secured it properly, and the propeller started to vibrate, and one of the prongs fell off, and the engine started to shake, and they had to do an emergency landing. And Aaron was telling me afterwards, he said, it's protocol that as you fly, you always keep a lookout for the next available biggest field, because in an emergency, then you don't have to start to look for it. You'd already know where it is. So he said that's why they landed in that field. It was a big, long field. And I was saying to the guys, like, what are you going to do? He said, okay, we radio back to base. There's another plane on the way to rescue us. And sure enough, another plane lands in the field as we're there. And they've got the toolkit on a new prop and everything. And one of the guys that hops out was a guy that I'd done martial arts with 20 years before. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. I got chatting away to him, and he said, "So we're going to fix this now." And I said, "Well, you come up to the house for a cup of tea or coffee before you go on the top of the field there." He said, "That's fine." And then another plane lands in the field. So there's 3 planes in the field, and the other pilots are kind of, "You okay? Yeah, no." So they all come back up to the house, and they're sitting outside. It's a bright sunny morning. There's a patio, the furniture out there, and I'm inside in the kitchen making tea and coffee. And Aaron's out there, surrounded by all of these pilots, and he's picking their brains and whatever. And I'm thinking, isn't this fascinating? And they have the tea and the coffee, and when they're finished and they're ready to go, they all take out their business cards and say, "Here, son, come up for some free lessons." So we got numerous flights out of that encounter. Isn't it amazing how you can manifest things? You know, sometimes what intrigues me is sometimes that the harder we try to manifest things, sometimes the more we stifle it. We kind of get in our own way. I think sometimes you have to kind of put it out there and maybe step back a little bit. It doesn't mean you have to sit on your hands, but it does mean that you put it out there, but you don't kind of, it's like going into a library and you're looking for a particular book and you crawl in over the desk and you're looking there and the librarian's going, I'll get it when you go, no, and you look at all the shelves, and after an hour of frustration, you kind of, where's the book? And she goes, it's here. The universe is a bit like that. You kind of have to get out of your own way.
Yeah, your son was doing everything. He was in his hands anyway. He knew everything. He learned everything he could.
Yeah, he was
dreaming of it. He had the poster there, and he was.
Yeah, he didn't know he was manifesting.
He knew everything. He knew but he did his part. It's not like that. Oh, I would like to fly, and that's it.
Yeah. And you do have to do your part. I remember when I was a kid, I had this vivid dream. And dreaming is one of the things I specialize in. I had this vivid dream where I'm in this red car, and it's kind of a long car, and it's got sponge wheels on it. And the car is going, and I'm bouncing over hedges, over roads, and it's boing, it's floating along. I thought it was fantastic, loved it. So that dream was parked in the back of my head for years. And I remember hearing about Citroen had an air suspension on their car, and it was the most comfortable car that you could get, because there most other cars had oil in the shock absorbers. I think it was Citroen, it was the only ones with air at the time. And I remember looking up a Citroen Xantia, only to discover that Citroen were replacing that with a Citroen C5. And I saw this lovely red Citroen C5, and I thought, oh my God, that's like the car in my dream from years ago. And I had been exposed to the idea of manifestation at this time. I thought, okay, I wonder how could I do that? How could I manifest this? So I did all the things you should do. I went and I took test drives in these Citroen C5s to kind of get the feel of it, get into it. And I remember a good friend of mine, Martin Connolly, he had manifested his dream car at that time, which was a Jaguar. He always loved Jaguars, and he got it. And I'm going to be soon after you, Martin. I'll get mine. And I remember
He's going a bit higher.
Yeah, I was in Galway. I was in Galway, going into Galway, and I happened to just turn to look to one side going into Galway. There was a garage, Kenny Hansbury, on the left as you come into Tune Road to Galway. And in the forecourt, there was this red Citroen C5, and there was almost like a beam of light coming down from the sky. It was just the way the sun broke through the clouds at that moment. It was like focused on the car, and I go, oh. And I said, I need to go in there and take a test drive of that car. And I went in, and the sales guy is all me. I'm kind of want him to keep telling me stuff about the car, but I kind of wanted him to know, and I actually got no money, so I can't buy this car. But and he said, no, just sit into it. He was doing the salesman thing, sit into it there and see whatever. And he said, no, I'll bring it for a spin. And I took it for a spin. And then he said to me, John, why don't you bring it home for the weekend? And I said, well, I live in Longford. And he goes, I'll bring it home for the weekend, and look at you bring it back. Let me know what you decide. So it was a good ploy. But I remember driving that car. And I told my friend Martin that what I wanted to manifest was a fire engine red C5 2-litre diesel. And I decided to ring Martin while I'm driving the car. And I said, Martin, you'd never guess what I'm driving. He goes, oh, you got your car? And I said, yeah, Martin, well, yeah. And he said, what do you mean? Yeah, well, yeah. And I said, well, it's a bright red Citroen C5, but it's 1.8 litre petrol. And he said, stop that car. And I said, no, Martin, it's lovely. It's great. He said, stop that car. Get out of that car. That's not your car. And I said, well, it's close. He said, it's not your car. You said a 2-litre diesel, that's not your car. And before this, I had been doing a lot of research on C5s, and I was going online, and every time I saw a lovely Citroen, I would click on the photograph of it, save it on a file on my computer. And it turned out that I got money from an unexpected source all of a sudden, and I did actually have the money to buy that car. But it was in the back of my head. Martin said, that's not your car. That's not your car. And I thought, well, but I'm manifesting it. And he said, no, that's not your car. So I went to the file where I had all these photographs of these Citroens. And I started to, because I was collecting them for weeks and even months, as I rang up the garages where these cars were, they all said, that it's gone. Oh, sorry, that's gone. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. And I got down to the last file, which actually had been the first Citroen C5 that I'd saved in my file. And it was a bright red fire engine red C5, 2-litre diesel, and it was in a garage in Limerick. And I rang that garage and they go, yeah, that car is still here. And I'm kind of going, well, yeah, you have this price on it, but it's been there for months. What's your best price? And I kind of bargained with them. And I said, okay. I said, well, I'm in Longford, you're in Limerick. I said, you know what? I have a friend in Limerick. I'll give him a ring, ask him to go and have a look at the car, and I'll get back to you then. So Aaron had been asking me what he was going to do with the car. I said, I don't honestly know this one in Limerick. It mightn't be the real deal or whatever. And I said, I know my car, Aaron. And he said, how will you know your car? And I said, it'll have my name written on the windscreen. The keys will be in the ignition. It'll be running. It'll be just there ready for me to go. And he used to slag me about that every time we passed the red Citroen C5. He said, Dad, go over and have a look and see the keys in it and just take it. So it ended up that my friend in Limerick came back to me and said, that car seems kosher. It seems like the real deal. And I said, okay. I rang the salesman. I said, I'm going to pop down to you tomorrow. So I popped down to him. I drove the Citroen that I got on loan from Galway. I drove that down to Limerick. And I parked at the garage. Aaron was with me. And outside the showroom was the red Citroen C5. The mechanic or the salesman had put a notice in the window, this car is for Paul Gill. And it was running. The key was in the ignition and it was running. And I said, Darren, that's my car. I said, I don't need to drive it. I know that's my car. And I took it out for a spin. I'm a terrible sense of direction in life. I got lost in Limerick. And the salesman thought that I'd nicked it. He thought I'd a pattern of taking cars from garages and going off and leaving them because I'd taken the other one from the garage in Galway. And eventually I had to ring him up and get directions back to the place. And I bought that car that day. And it was the best car I've ever had. I absolutely loved that car. But again, it was manifested, not in a kind of a direct way.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, yeah, it's putting your energy out there, Anna. You know. So yeah, that's what I do to manifest things. Even I worked in iRadio. And I remember I used to have a show on a Sunday night, and I do a 3-hour show on a Sunday night talking about dream interpretation, a bit of psychology and whatever else. It was entertainment as well. There was funny bits in it. But I used to go in on a Friday into the studio to record my promo for Sunday. And I remember going in there one particular Friday, and I saw a book on the desk of somebody else's. And it was a book by a lady called Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. And Mary Helen had been in a car crash in the States. She was American, and she had died and left her body and come back. And so she was very much into spiritual matters and whatever. And I said, that looks like a fascinating book. And I thought, I'd love to meet that person. Her picture was on the back cover. And I thought, okay, I think I know whose show. She must be on somebody else's show, so I'll ask her. And as I was thinking, the doorbell of the reception rings, and normally there was a receptionist there, but she was gone. So I kind of just go over and I open the door, open it, and there is Mary Helen outside.
What?
Yes. And she looks at me, and before I have a chance to say anything, she goes, I've been meaning to meet you. Said, I wanted to meet you. And I said, that's a coincidence. And she's there. Yeah. So you can say that's a coincidence, but that happens so often, Anna. Like there was another time where a friend of mine, I wanted to do something on the Simon community for the radio, and about people who are in bad places in their lives and suicidal and all that kind of stuff. And I met a friend of mine. I came out of the radio station. I was going for a cup of coffee, and I met a friend of mine. I'm chatting. She said, what are you doing on show Sunday? I'm saying, I want to do this bit on the Simon community. I said, but I don't know anybody in Simon. And she said, oh, I know a guy. He's, what's his name? What's his name? And then she goes, there he is there, just walking across the car park. And I just walk over to this stranger and go, you don't know me, but I know you're involved in the helping people in bad situations. So I said, would you come on my show? And he goes, yeah. So instant manifestation. And even Anna, the story of how I got on that radio station in the first place, sometimes when you don't do a whole lot of overthinking. I remember I got up one morning, I had to go from Longford to Dublin, and I'm busy getting stuff ready, and I got a packet of Post-its, and I just wrote on it, I want to have my own radio show. I'd been on other people's radio shows talking about dreams and stuff, and I want my own radio show. And I just put the Post-it on the side of this filing cabinet, went out, got in the car, drove up the road. 10 minutes later, my phone rings, and I stop, I pull in, and I answer, and this guy, and he goes, Paul, you don't know me, but we're starting up a new radio station, we want you. And I'm kind of going, like, F off. Like, I thought this was a prank. I really did. And I was thinking, like, is somebody bugged my house? Is somebody playing a trick on me? What the hell is going on? So I cautiously start to talk to this guy, and he's genuine and all the rest. And yes, they were starting up this radio station. I said, how did you get my name? He said, to be honest, he said, we weren't actually looking for you. And I go, oh, right, okay. And he said, we were actually looking for this other lady, but she's ill at the moment. But she was at a conference where you spoke the other week, and she was very impressed listening to you. She couldn't remember your name, but she knew the lady who had organized the conference, and she gave me her details. I rang her, and I'm now talking to you. And I sat on the side of the road talking to that guy for about best part of an hour, as far as I remember. He was telling me about dreams that he had, and I was able to tell him what was going on in his life, and there was a lot of stuff going on in his life. And he said, my God, you saw the money. Yeah, he said, I want you to come down to the G Hotel in Galway to interview for the job. And I said to him, I think I've already done the interview there. And he said, no, I want you for the job. He said, just have to get the approval of everybody else. So I ended up in the G Hotel the following week. And then I started on the radio, I think it was the following week after that. Just, things happen. Yeah. Clicking the fingers, yes.
Is this available for everybody, Paul?
It is. Everybody has their own, I think everybody's their own particular style of manifesting things. But we're giving out signals of frequency. Like, again, if you use the radio analogy, when I'm on the radio station and I'm talking about dreams, people start texting in with their dreams. If I'm talking about football, people are texting about football. You will constantly giving a frequency out to the universe, and we get back whatever frequency we're giving out. So if you're depressed, down, not in a good energy space, that must be what you're projecting out there. And when you're honest with yourself and you sit down and you ask yourself, where's this coming from? Your mind will tell you. This is what I suppose, working with the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind, when we have a problem, we tend to give out about it. We complain about it. We give out to other people about it. We blame the world for it and whatever.
Put it outside.
Yeah. But when you ask your subconscious mind, what do I need to do to fix this problem? Your subconscious mind actually goes, you've never asked that question before. Here's how to fix it. This is what you did previously, back in 1986. This is what you did in 95. This is what you did in, yeah. And it'll give you data. Your subconscious mind always bombarding you with data and information. Like when I get a new client into my clinic, I'll say to them, this room that I've just brought you into, you've never been in this room before, but a second ago when you walked in that door, your mind made a decision whether it liked this room or not. And they kind of go, yeah. I said, how did your mind make that decision? How did it base it on? You've never been in this room before. Well, it based it on a database of similar rooms that you've ever been in or seen or even read about or been told about. And your mind in a split second goes, yes or no, I like that. It does it with people. When you see people, you make a decision. Do I like this person? Do I not? And the decision it doesn't have to be factually accurate or correct. Like, again, an example I use is if you walk across a car park and you see a man coming towards you with his head covered in a hoodie, his head down, you can't see his eyes or his face, but he's walking towards you, maybe his hands shuffling along, your mind goes, that guy's trouble, and you try to avoid him. Now, your mind decides he's trouble because it connects to a database that tells you, I've seen horror films, slasher films where people like that have knives or guns or whatever. Now, the guy might be the nicest guy in the world, but you don't give him the benefit of that because your database says, no, statistically, more than likely, he is trouble. So your mind does that with everything that's in your life. And when you become aware of that, like I'm quite aware of everything that I think. Now, that can be overwhelming if you kind of spend too much time doing it. And sometimes I just switch off my mind and try not to think. One of my hobbies or pastimes is that, I might come home from work and I'll just watch a guy on YouTube change the wheel of a car or fix some part of an engine. I don't have to think about that. I just kind of watch it. Or I might watch a guy fishing. When other times of the day I will bombard my mind with, if I go for a walk, I'm listening to things on an app called Blinkist, where they summarize books. So you can get a broad book, and then I listen to books on Audible. So I'm kind of nurturing my mind and my body at the same time. But other times you kind of go, no, I just don't want to think about anything. I just want to switch my mind off. But it's very useful when you can have a certain awareness of the way that you are. Because when you have that awareness, you kind of go, okay, I can identify the problem, and then I can ask my mind where the problem comes from. And when you do that, the subconscious mind can change how it feels towards the problem. Have I time to give you an example?
By becoming the observer, is it? Please go ahead with your example.
Yeah, many years ago, a friend of mine approached me, asked me would I speak to her daughter. Her daughter's name was Amy. Amy was 11. She was a bright, outgoing girl. She was involved in sports activities, Irish dancing in particular. Happy out as far as I was concerned, knew the family well. And I said to her, what's wrong with Amy? And she said to me, I think she's getting depressed. And this really surprised me. And I said, my God, when did you notice that? And she said, well, about 2 weeks ago, she was coming back from Irish dancing. And she said, she sat down the back of the bus on her way home by herself, seated alone. And she was quite sullen, quite down on herself. And she said, she hasn't spoken to me about that or much else in the last 2 weeks. I think she's getting depressed. I didn't want to bring her to the GP straight away in case he puts her on medication, but she knows you, she might talk to you. So brought the two of them in, mother and Amy in, and I'm chatting with Amy, making a bit of small talk just to get her comfortable. She knew me anyway, so she was comfortable speaking to me. And I was saying to her, like, if I say something entirely random, like President Michael D. Higgins, when I say that, everybody who's listening to that, a picture of Michael D pops up in your head. It's as if your mind pulled a file on Michael D. Higgins. And it kind of goes, he's president of Ireland, he's a small man, soft voice, his wife is twice big, and he's got 2 dogs, he lives in Orson. You didn't have to look for that data. Your mind just furnished that data. If I mention anything like, Strictly Come Dancing, if I mention the news, anything, your mind will pull data that tells you that you know about this. So with Amy, I said to Amy, if you were to choose one word that describes how you feel, what would that one word be? And she thought about it for a moment and she said, sadness. I said, here's the thing. When you experience sadness, you think about it in your head, but you experience it in your body in the same ways you feel maybe a pang of anxiety in your belly or excitement in your chest. I said, close your eyes, go into your body and tell me, where is the sadness? And to my amazement, Anna, she said, my knees. Like, how can you have sad knees? But you can. And I said to her, if you keep your eyes closed and start to breathe into that, first of all, before I did it, I said to her, that feeling in your knees, if it had a color, what color would it be? And she said, dark gray. And if it also had a texture, what texture would it have? And she said, a heavy, wet texture. And I said to her, breathe into that heavy, wet, grey feeling, make it twice as big, twice as big, twice as big. And when it was at the point of bursting, I picked my fingers and I said to her subconscious mind, link and connect this feeling, go right back to the very first time you ever felt this feeling. The same feeling, maybe different circumstances, maybe years and years before. And guess what? Amy's mind pulled a file. She regressed to a memory where she was 6 years of age, and her subconscious mind was saying, this is when you had this feeling for the first time. Subconscious mind is remarkable the way it can pinpoint a particular feeling in all of time. Amy, in this experience, she was walking around her local national school, and she's wearing the school uniform, which was a blue fleece and a light grey tracksuit pants and runners, and she's feeling this sadness. Now, I knew that Amy's family had moved from Dublin down to Offaly, and she'd gone from a city school down to a small little rural national school, and there was a clique of girls in the school that bullied her. She was the only child in school with a Dublin accent, so imagine, like, every time the teacher asked her to speak or got her to read something, the other girls would titter and laugh and snigger at her. So poor little 6-year-old Amy is feeling very tearful. She walks around the back of the school. She sits on the bench in the cloister, on the wooden seat in the cloister, and she's talking to herself in her head. And she's saying, I'm sad, I'm miserable, nobody likes me, I'm different from everybody. Now, we all talk to ourselves in our heads all the time. And what we say to ourselves, we believe it to be true. We believe our own propaganda. The subconscious mind is our emotional mind, and it never forgets anything. So while Amy's sitting there talking to herself, saying these things to herself, she's swinging her feet to and fro off the floor, over and back, over and back. And as she's doing that, it starts to rain. And she's so sad in herself that she doesn't even bother to try to pull her knees in out of the rain. She just watches the rain trickle down on her knees, and her legs from her knees down turn heavy, wet, dark grey. The exact colours, the exact description her subconscious mind had furnished a few minutes before. So it proves that the subconscious mind knows more about what's going on than we do. So fast forward 5-6 years, Amy's now 11. She's coming back from Irish dancing on the bus. She'd been dancing all day. Her legs are sore and tired. She's sitting down the back of the bus, and guess what? She's talking in her head, and she's saying, I won nothing. The other girls won lots of stuff. Nobody wants to sit beside me. I'm different from everybody else. She's swinging her feet to and fro off the floor of the bus, the exact same behavior. And her subconscious mind that never forgets anything suddenly doubled the size of her sadness file. And that was the cause of her sadness. So you can do some work around that then to change that. You can't change the past, but you can change how you feel about it. And when you do that, everything in the present is different when you come back.
Makes sense, yeah. And engrams, they're called, aren't they?
Sorry, say again?
Engrams, engramas. In Spanish is engrama. No, it's all the things that were happening when she was getting her knees wet.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
In the day, everything together. So it was the rain, the legs hanging, the feelings and emotions she was going through, everything together. I think it's called engram. One of them can trigger everything else.
Yes.
On a rainy day, she can go there directly because that triggers what happened before, that group of things. Yeah,
the same as a smell or a song can trigger a memory.
Yeah, plus the fact that when she was recording all this, she was under 7 and everything she believed was true, just like the fairy tales or...
Yeah, and it doesn't apply just to 7-year-olds. I mean, the mind is going through a particular change around the age of 6 or 7.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, things can be compounded, kind of added weight around that. But even adults, when you listen to people speak, they'll tell you about themselves, and the words they use to describe anything describes themselves. So they could be talking about the weather or politics or sport, and the adjectives they use you can apply them to themselves. So people have asked me, are you a psychic? How can you? And I go, no, you're just telling me stuff. You're telling me, especially in your dreams. Dreams are entirely honest. And I love it, when I have a dream or somebody else has a dream and they're not happy about the dream. I kind of go, okay, this is something that I probably didn't want to admit about myself, or I don't want to look at. It's an aspect of my life, and I need to address this. So I'm grateful to my subconscious for bringing the issue up.
For bringing it up, so it changes. Tell us about your book, the one about dreams, which I suppose it was a challenge being dyslexic, as you said you were.
It was, and it brought up a lot of things, Anna, because only for spell check, I'd never be able to have written the book. I'm terrible at handwriting. My handwriting is illegible, even to me. Sometimes I go back and I read a client's file and I go, what was that? And I'm kind of, oh wait, I have the wrong way up. But when I was doing interpreting dreams on radio, and it was a kind of a big part of my show. I got into, again, this is manifestation, and when I was a newly qualified hypnotherapist, dream interpretation is part of what I do, because it's like a report from the subconscious mind as to how things are down here, and you can get information, and sometimes information that the client is blind to. So I would randomly or have people record their dreams over a number of weeks as to come to see me for their sessions. So I remember somebody in marketing said, you need to get on the radio to get interviewed about hypnosis, hypnotherapy, get your name out there so that you can get established. And I kind of got, yeah, I do. Okay. I was a bit anxious and a bit nervous about it. I wasn't as confident as I am now. Okay, I'll put it on my list of things to do, and then I'd lose that list deliberately. So one day, a guy comes into my clinic to give up smoking. And it turns out he works for a radio station. And happy with the session, and then I said, I was thinking of ringing up a radio station. I said, who would I ring? I said, ring Sinead. There's Sinead's number. Tell her I said to ring. And I go, yeah, thanks. I'm going, oh, it's not a remarkable piece of luck. Got the number and whatever. And did I act on it? No. I left that number there again for 3 weeks. I have this pattern of leaving things for 3 weeks. That number sat on my desk, and I was kind of going, yeah, I'll ring that number. Yeah. And I never actually decided to ring. So eventually I kind of go, okay, stop driving myself nuts. I need to ring that number. So I picked up the phone and I rang the number. I said, hello, Sinead, you don't know me or whatever. And I said, I wanted to come on and talk about giving up smoking with hypnosis. And she goes, oh, she said, if only you'd rang last week. We'd somebody else on last week talking about that exact topic. And I go, this my opportunity. And I kind of go, okay, thank you very much. He goes, what else do you do? And I said, well, you have people with weight loss, with anger issues, anxiety, and dream interpretation. Because I had my brochure open on my desk, a printed out brochure we used to have back in the day. And I said, dreams. I've been having this recurring dream. It's a dream about an elephant on an island, and the elephant keels over, and it's injured, it's sick, and whatever. And I got chatting to her about the dream, and it turned out that the elephant was female, which was a key part of the dream. The elephant was a matriarchal figure, and that matriarchal figure was this girl's mother, who was ill or having health issues at the time, and the island is kind of place where you're isolated. She felt isolated from her mother or whatever. There was a lot of stuff there, and she said, "Oh my God, that's fantastic. That's brilliant. She said, can you come on Monday and talk about dreams?" I go, yeah, okay. And I hung up the phone, a kind of bit gobsmacked. And when I looked at my brochure in front of me on the desk, it had smoking, weight loss, anxiety, phobia. Dream interpretation wasn't on it. I had just said the right thing. Yep.
Crazy.
Yep.
Paul, indeed, you can be talking forever, and I will be here listening forever with my jaw dropping every now and then. We come to the top of the hour, but it would be a pleasure to have you again in the future.
I'd be delighted.
Talking about whatever, and well, it seems that you don't need to think about any topic; it just happens like this, right?
I know a lot about a lot of things. I don't know a whole lot about anything in particular. Random stuff. So
let's make sure that in the future you talk about something else, or just whatever it is. How can people reach you?
They can reach me. My email is paul@paulgill.ie. It's the same as my website. And my contact number is 086 105 4813.
Okay, which is an Irish number. Therefore, whoever is calling from the outside is +353. Drop the first 0 and keep going. Yeah,
and can I plug? I've just started doing podcasts myself. Just weeks ago. So I've recorded 4 of them with a colleague of mine in Athlone. So it's called Mind Blowing. And I was talking a little bit about kind of stuff that we talked about and other stuff too. So I'll put the link for that. I'll send you the link for that, and you can
please do. Yeah, I will put it down below. Yes.
Okay.
Pleasure. Paul, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna.